Hey guys, thanks for tuning back in to Weird Mythic Podcast. I'm Naomi.
I'm Serena.
And thanks again for, listening to us for our third episode. We do want to do a disclaimer for this episode. It's a little bit morbid and can be sad. We are going to be talking about suicide and overdoses. Today's episode is about the 27 Club.
Yeah, and so, it is a tragedy, and in no way are we romanticizing this like a lot of, media can do. It's definitely not something that we do want to do, so throwing that out there. Also, I do want to mention the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. Definitely reach out. There's always somebody to help.
There's always somebody who will talk to you, and even if you just have questions, somebody will answer the phone and someone will talk to you. So we wanted to put that out there for everyone. So.
All right, guys. Well, let's jump into it. Again, this episode, we're going to be talking about the 27 Club.
Yeah.
Naomi, do you want to mention a little bit what it is?
So the 27 Club is a club that really nobody wants to be part of. First off.
Yeah, I don't like the word club. I don't like that they use the word club, but unfortunately that's what it is.
That's what it's been called since the 70s, actually. So, so this is a club is sadly, we don't even say a club. Like you said, we don't even want to say that. But it is a group of popular musicians and artists who have all passed away at the age of 27. And surprisingly, there is a very, very long list. But the big six that everybody talks about... I'm going to go off of those first six real quick. We have Robert Johnson, and he passed away in 1938. Then we also have Brian Jones. He was one of the guitarists for Rolling Stones, and he passed away in 1960. We also have Jimi Hendrix, who passed away in 1970, Janis Joplin in 70, and Jim Morrison in 1971. What's really sad is those last 5 artists from Brian Jones, and there was also a man, and his name was Alan Wilson, who was a blues player. All of them sadly passed away between 1969 and 1971. So that's one big coincidence that, was definitely worth mentioning. So let's just go ahead and get into it. The term 27 Club has been around since the 1970s, but it wasn't until the death of Kurt Cobain in 1994 that the 27 Club became more popularly known in the public, or at least came back into the public from the 70s. And then it happened again with Amy Winehouse's death in 2011. The club has been mainly for musicians, but there are so many other artists and even athletes that sadly have all tragically passed by the age of 27. I did find a research paper that was done recently in 2006 that the author found 140 musicians from 1892 to 2006 who have all passed away at the age of 27. He believes that instead of it starting with the blues musician Robert Johnson, that it actually started with a classical pianist, Alexandra Levy. He was a Brazil folk music and classical music artist, and he passed away in 1892 at the age of 27. There was also a study done by the British Medical Journal, and they stated that there's no statistical evidence of the deaths of rock stars by the age of 27. Pretty much what they were saying is they are not at high risk, but they did find that anyone between the ages of 25 and 32 are at high risk for suicides and freak accidents. Sorry, we're going to have to cut that too. So, and that was done by the British Medical Journal. They were really looking for anything between all of the deaths that made sense.
Like connecting.
Connecting anything. They really didn't find anything. The most they did find was, that it's just the age of people, and that's just sad in general. That can happen to anyone at those ages. There was another part of the study that was done that a lot of it could be done because of lifestyle choices. So especially back in the 70s with Joplin, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, just that whole scene in general.
Yeah, and it was just their lifestyle. A lot of them were really sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and they lived their life exactly like that. And
that
just
in compilation with the mental illness and all of that is just...
Exactly. They also found that 23% of solo artists. So some of those artists that did pass away at 27 were solo artists. And only 10% of them were in a band or a group. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The more likely to pass at the age of 27 was between 1960 and 1970. And like I said, it was just based off lifestyle and the way that people were living back in the day. I guess since the turn of the century, I think mental illness and drugs in general, we've brought a lot of that to the forefront of everybody talking about it and being open about it. I think that helps us. A couple of other theories that I came across that I thought were odd is Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Kurt Cobain were all found with a white lighter, which took me down a rabbit hole. And apparently there was a few other white lighter conspiracy theories saying that the white lighter is an omen of death. So, and I've actually heard this from friends who smoke cigarettes. They don't buy white lighters. So I thought that was very interesting. Something also that happened, because a lot of this did happen before the 90s, Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain both spoke about the 27 Club before they passed. So I think that's a really creepy omen that they both had of themselves.
I have that here in mine about Kurt Cobain too, which I'll read in a little bit. And his mother, too. She also spoke about the 27 Club. So.
So creepy omens of people predicting possibly their own deaths or demise. And it's just very, very sad. So somebody that I wanted to talk about who I thought started the 27 Club, and I hate saying started the 27 Club, but I really don't have any other words for it at this time. So
it's an initiation.
Yeah, I'm I feel really bad for even talking about something like that. But I really wanted to talk about this man, Robert Johnson. He passed away in 1938. He was a blues musician. And not only was he a blues musician, but he brought forth what is rock and roll today, I feel like.
Yeah, he kickstarted kind of the whole
Pretty
thing.
much, yeah. So a little bit about him and his background. First off, Robert Johnson does not have a birth certificate, period. So they believe he was born in 1911.
We don't even know.
Yeah.
Could be the 32 Club.
Who knows? So he was born in Mississippi to a sharecropper family. He had 10 other siblings. His mom had him out of wedlock, though, and he ended up leaving his mom and going to Tennessee with his stepdad pretty much at one point. Then he ended up going back to Mississippi to be with his mom a few years later. And so he grew up with his mom in Mississippi at an old, in a very poor part of town.
Yeah, and that's a rough area at that time in history.
And if anybody doesn't know what a sharecropper is or who they were, please look it up. I don't want to go into that because that gets me angry a little, so I don't want to get into that. But that's the type of family that he grew up in, so very poor. They had nothing. Robert Johnson was married twice. Sadly, both of his wives passed away. And there was that. Couldn't really find a whole lot of information on his wives. He is known as the king of the Delta Blues, with only 29 recorded songs between the years of 1936 and 1937. So within that year and those 29 recordings, he put a huge, huge impact on the Delta Blues area, into the blues music genre, and then later on into rock and roll. So, about Robert Johnson. Apparently, he was not the best musician in the beginning. Other musicians would say, not only did he need a lot of practice, but they were afraid that he was going to break the guitar strings on a lot of his guitars.
Wow.
He would play so rough, and it wasn't that good, and nobody really cared for it. He did, however, have one guitar teacher, and he went by the name of Ike Zimmerman. But Ike would take Robert Johnson to the cemetery to practice his guitar, so nobody would complain about the noise. The only quiet place they could go to was the cemetery.
That is a good audience.
Back in the 1930s, Robert Johnson did leave the Delta Blues area for a little bit, and then he came back about a year later. But when he came back, all of a sudden, he was a shredder on the guitar, and he was just blowing the minds off of all these other blues artists who have been playing the blues their whole life and telling him that he might need a new career. There was a quote from a famous musician here, and his name was Son House, and there's also one by Willie Brown. Both of them said that when he finished playing after that year of being gone, their mouths were just dropped to the floor. They couldn't believe that within a year time that he got so much better. So he was eventually signed to a record company, was able to record those 29 songs. But then all of a sudden he passed away just that same year he was able to record them. Legend goes that year he was gone, he sold his soul to the devil.
It's in a song too, right?
I was going to say it's in a few of his songs. Apparently he went down to, where was it? I had it down on here exactly the town he went to that he was in Mississippi, and I cannot find it at this point in my notes. However, he went down to a crossroads, and he got down on his knees, and apparently he prayed to God that he just wanted this talent. He wanted to be the best guitarist. And a tall, darker man came up to him, and there was no, exact description of who or what he saw, but it was a tall, dark figure, and he played his guitar and tuned it, gave it back to Robert Johnson, and then Robert Johnson was able to play after that, perfectly. If you do listen to some of his songs, listen to Me and the Devil Blues. He actually talks about the devil knocking on his door and then going down to the highway where he passes away. Robert Johnson put that in his own song. And then there's another one called Hellhounds on My Trail. And he has a lyric in there saying that he's using hot foot powder to keep the hounds away. Hot foot powder is actually just a bunch of peppers, spices, and herbs that were ground together, and then kind of like how you use salt, how you would put it at your doorstep.
Like a barrier.
Exactly. But this was for hoodoo. Not voodoo, hoodoo, which is more of a spiritual belief. So he actually put that around his house to keep the hellhounds away. So even listening to stuff like that, it kind of adds into that whole legend of him selling his soul to the devil. So yeah, there was those two songs I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of other lore around his death. They're not sure if he passed away due to being poisoned by somebody's husband because he was flirting with this one woman who had a jealous husband. He got sick and it took him about 3 days to finally pass. So it wasn't an easy thing for him to do or an easy thing for him to go through. He was very, very sick those last 3 days of his life.
It seems like that's a common theme with, a lot of the people in the 27 Club is the deaths were said to be this, but we're not sure, possibly,
Yeah.
So, especially Kurt Cobain, I know that's one that...
Especially Kurt Cobain. Yeah. But the other theory was if he was not poisoned by somebody's jealous husband, there was... See, I couldn't find a death certificate either. Couldn't find a death certificate. Couldn't find a birth certificate. But there was some type of death certificate that was done without an autopsy. And apparently he could have passed away due to syphilis.
Oh, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, so there's two different things. But the main thing that he's famous for is possibly selling his soul to the devil.
One of the first, probably, if you look at it like that.
Yeah, so that is Robert Johnson. He was inducted to the Blues Hall of Fame in 1980 and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, which I think is too late. He should have been inducted a lot sooner than that.
Yeah.
Something that I really like about Robert Johnson in general is he only has 2 or 3 pictures to this day that there's no other pictures of him. He only has those 29 songs, but there's so many rock stars and blues musicians that still talk about him to this day. The way that he played guitar and moved his fingers up and down the neck was unlike anything that anyone has seen before that. He brought it to today's time, and everybody still plays the guitar like Robert Johnson.
And then that's how I feel about Jimi Hendrix.
Yep.
So, we have our favorites in our little...
Yeah. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about Jim Morrison. If you don't know who Jim Morrison is, he was the lead singer of The Doors, and he was also a very good poet. He was not a musician at all. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there. He sadly passed away in 1971 through, he had a heart attack that was caused through a heroin overdose.
Back to that lifestyle.
Yeah, that lifestyle choice. So the theories behind his death, again, just putting it out there, there was no autopsy done. There was crazy. No autopsy done for Jim Morrison.
Was that a normal thing in that time period, or just for these specific... were they covering something up? Like, what?
That's one of the theories. Yeah. That's the thing. So
because why wouldn't you do an autopsy?
Why wouldn't you? Like, I can understand back in the 30s, 20s, not doing an autopsy. You know, they really didn't have a whole lot of medical.
I think even then, though, they still had, you know,
they should have, right?
And ways to document. Whereas it doesn't make sense. These people don't have death certificates, birth certificates, and
yeah.
It's crazy to me.
So Jim Morrison, no autopsy done. The French police found him in the bathtub of his apartment. His girlfriend called it in at the time. There are 3 theories to his death. The first one is that his girlfriend at the time and Jim Morrison were in their hotel that night doing heroin. He ended up not feeling too well, and I guess their idea was to put him into a bathtub and let him cool down and chill, and she didn't see him till that next morning and called it in. So that's one theory.
That's sketchy to me.
I agree, because I'm sorry, you wouldn't let your boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, anybody just sit in the bathtub all night. So
especially if you're familiar with that lifestyle. I mean, you put people to bed a certain way so that they don't, like, asphyxiate. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So why leave them in a bathtub?
I'm not saying I'm in that lifestyle. I just know, you know, it's a common thing. That's crazy to me.
Another theory is that he actually took the heroin by mistake. He thought it was cocaine and did way too much. So that's another theory.
I think that was Janis Joplin as well.
A theory that I thought was very odd, though, that so he did pass away in 1971, but in 2007, a manager at this popular Paris nightclub that Jim Morrison and his girlfriend used to go to all the time, the manager at that club came forward in 2007 saying that Jim actually overdosed in his club's bathroom. But they weren't sure if he was 100% dead. So him and a bouncer and one other person picks Jim up off the floor, takes him to his apartment, and then put him in the bathtub.
You're an accomplice to murder at that point, in my eyes.
That's what I see, too. Why would you not call the police? I don't understand why they didn't just call the cops.
It's mind-blowing.
They don't. If you're not a medical professional, you're not a doctor, you don't know if he passed away or not, call the cops. Call an ambulance. So those are the sad theories between Jim Morris's death at the age of 27. I have 2 more I want to talk about. There was this man, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce his name, but it is Jean-Michel Bisquois. He was an African-American man who grew up in Brooklyn. He was a neo-expressionism artist. He did paintings and sculptures, mainly paintings. He sadly passed away also in 1988, and this was also due to a heroin overdose. What's really sad is everyone kept saying he was getting sober. He was getting sober, and then all of a sudden this happened. Yeah, and that's all they had. I'm not sure if they did an autopsy on that one. I couldn't find that they actually did it.
With his track record.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I couldn't find that they actually did an autopsy for him or not. But he was really famous, guys, through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He did art with Andy Warhol. And in 1980, he made $1.4 million that year based on his art alone. Wow. That's $4.2 million today. That's how good of an artist he was. And the type of art he did, he would take like objects or figures and then kind of distort them a little so it looked really kind of dramatic and not totally like how it should look, you know? So it was really abstract looking and very expressionist, like seemed like there was a lot of pain in his art. And he was really trying to get something across a lot about race also, especially back in the 80s. With that,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so if anybody hasn't looked up his art, I definitely recommend checking him out. Jean-Michel Bisquois. The last name is Basquiat. And he had really pretty art. I had to look into it because I never really knew the guy. And this was a good way for me to see his art and what he's done for the art community since then.
Awesome. Let's share something on our Instagram then.
Yeah, definitely. The last person I want to talk about, and I'm sorry if I pronounce her name even though I tried it before coming onto the cast today, but Thuy Trang. She's a Vietnamese American actress. She is best known for playing Trini Kwan, the Yellow Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And come on, we were all fans of Power Ranger, right? Yeah. Especially the original.
My brother will tell you, the Yellow Ranger, she was my favorite.
So much fun to watch. I still think about that just because I see like the new reruns now and I'm like, it's not the same.
It's not
just not the same. It's not even fun. So sadly, she passed away at the age of 27 as well, but hers was due to a car crash. So a little bit of background on her. She is a Vietnamese-American actress. Her family did come from Vietnam when she was very young. I think she was actually born there. She was not born in America.
Nice.
When she went for the role for the Yellow Ranger, she went up against 500 other actresses for that role. And she got it. She got that. So she also did the majority of her own stunts and got hurt every now and then on set. But she insisted on doing her own stunts.
Kick ass.
I was like, hell yes. The only reason she left the show was due to contract and payment. And I guess with her and two of the other Rangers that they all quit kind of the same day mid-season 2 because they weren't having good contracts and money coming in, which they should have.
They should have.
So sadly, she died because she was in this car crash and she was coming back home with a couple friends that were all hanging out together. And they were going south on I-5 when the car hit some gravel. She was not driving. Sadly, she was the only one who did not survive. The other 2 women did survive. So, I mean, that has to be extremely hard on any friends just to know you were in the car with them. And 1,000%. I can't imagine what they had to go through.
The guilt that you would carry.
The guilt, yes. But something that I do want to end on, she had a lot of good friends, and they still talk about her to this day. One of them who was in the car with her, her name was Angela Rockwood. She was a model actress, and I think she still does some acting or modeling to this day. I mean, she was paralyzed from the neck down after that accident, and the doctors gave her a 3% survival chance. She is up and doing her thing now, okay? Yeah. Angela Rockwood went through physical therapy and stem cell research and now is not a quadriplegic. She can now be in her own wheelchair, moving herself around. She got through it. And I'm sure having a friend like Tui probably helped her along the way. Mm-hmm. So those are the 27 club members that I wanted to talk about. Again, I'm really sorry, guys, but it's just a strange coincidence. A lot of these actors or a lot of these artists don't have an autopsy or done, and we don't really know exactly what happened. Some of them, they didn't even call for, hours after this person was unconscious, and it's just all very sketchy. Not to mention all of the people that I did research on have more than one theory to their death. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little. I know it's morbid and sad, but just kind of wanted to put it out there. So thanks again, guys.
All right.
Pass it off over to my girl, Serena.
Yeah, so this, again, it's just so crazy and heavy to talk about. I'm going to talk about Kurt Cobain first. Super popular. I don't think that there's anybody who doesn't know who Kurt Cobain is. Mm-hmm. He was an icon of the Seattle grunge scene. Kurt Cobain formed Nirvana with a friend in 1985. The band achieved mainstream success in the early 90s. Cobain struggled with mental illness, chronic health problems, and heroin addiction. He allegedly committed suicide in 1994.
Allegedly,
I threw that in there, yeah, because... And I think that that's an episode in itself as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the hole that I got down.
I'm sure, yeah.
So following Cobain's death, his mother, Wendy O'Connor, famously said, "Now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club." Weeks later, Rolling Stone confirmed that she was talking about the 27 Club. Mm-hmm. Crazy, I got chills.
Yes, yeah.
So the mythology around the 27 Club gained prominence after that, since he died at the same age as iconic rock musicians Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison when they died in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And then Janis Joplin, we'll talk a little bit about her. So Janis Joplin went over the San Francisco music scene with her bluesy vocals and powerful stage presence. She was fun to watch.
I'm a huge Joplin fan. I have a big poster of her actually in my house.
Girl, you should have talked about her. I did not do this justice then.
No.
My little snippet here.
No, you're good. No, she's amazing. If nobody's actually listened to her music, please just pause the show and just listen.
And then review us on
Google Podcasts. And then review us.
Okay, so she, despite multiple attempts to get clean, she did become increasingly addicted to heroin and alcohol as her career skyrocketed again back to that lifestyle. She died of a heroin overdose in 1970, less than 3 weeks after Jimi Hendrix died. Yeah. Super close.
She was close with Hendrix, and she knew Morrison as well.
Yeah, they all kind of ran in the same, circles. Which that's like another coincidental thing to mention is a lot of them are mentioned in each other's stories. I have a little bit of a longer one on Jimi Hendrix. He was my favorite to kind of research. It was still really sad, but he's just a freaking genius. Yeah. That man. So he's remembered as one of the greatest electric guitarists in history. Hendrix, if I can talk. I have no beers today, I swear, but Hendrix revolutionized rock and roll as both an artist and a producer during his brief career. I think it was only something like 4 years long. Yeah. That he actually, just like your guy.
Yeah, just like Robert Johnson.
Such a short amount of time to have such a huge impact on people and to music to this day. Yeah. All right, he died in London in September of 1970. His girlfriend, Monica Damon, found him breathing but unconscious when she woke up. He was rushed to the hospital but found dead almost immediately. The autopsy revealed that Hendrix died of asphyxia and that he had 18 times the recommended dose of Vesparax, which is sleeping pills, in his system. 18 times. His girlfriend stated that Hendrix was a heavy drug user, particularly fond of LSD. Again, back to the 70s. It's like, that was it for people, man. And that night, he washed down a handful of sleeping pills with a glass of red wine before going to bed. Hendrix had also been somewhat predicting his own death. After a tarot reading in Morocco turned up the death card. What? He told his friend that he was going to die before he was 30.
Oh my gosh.
That was crazy to me.
One thing I do got to point out about tarot cards, though.
Oh, I'm about to...
Okay, go for it. Yeah, my bad.
The death card in tarot, it's unlikely that this card actually means physical death. Typically, it implies an end, possibly of a relationship or interest, and therefore implies an increased sense of self-awareness. So it could just be he was, like, hyper-aware. Yeah. And then, actually, 2 days before his death, he told a friend, "I'm almost gone."
Oh my gosh, that's so freak. Look at that. I know. I got hella chills.
It was so disturbing and sad to... But yeah, so he asphyxiated on his own vomit, and that's how he ultimately passed away. What's weird to me, though, is that he was, like, breathing, but unconscious, and then immediately said to be dead when he got to the hospital. But I'm like...
Like they didn't try to revive him?
Yeah, that's my thing, is it didn't give me that information of, like, what happened there, because EMTs are gonna work on you, you know.
Like, that's their job. They're supposed to bring you back before even going to the hospital.
Yeah, so I don't know, because I know that they're not allowed to call it in the field, so maybe that was a misinformation where he actually was dead at the scene, but they just couldn't call it. Right. And then that's why I don't... That was a part that it was a little bit confusing for me, but... Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's heavy. That's what I have. Those are my members. There's a couple shows that we found that we want to mention. There's actually an entire podcast about the 27 Club. I want to shout that out. You can find it. It's at 27clubpod.com. If you want to do any more research on that, definitely give it a listen. And then... That it's remastered, The Devil at the Crossroads, and that's about Robert Johnson. You can find it on Netflix. It's really good.
And they have a couple other remastered, actually. I'll just go ahead. The whole remastered series is really good. Yeah. They have a good one on Bob Marley as well for when he was almost assassinated, if you guys don't know that story.
Yep, and that's on Netflix. And then... Should we talk about the creepy horror movie?
The one that neither of us watched?
We didn't watch it, but it was like... I still might. It was really low budget, you could tell. It only has like a 3-star rating. Yeah. It's called The 27 Club. It came out in 2019, and it was directed by Patrick Fogarty. Okay. But... You can watch it on Tubi TV. That's how you know it's not.
Yeah, there's also a Facebook page that I follow. It's 27 and then period club, so 27 Club. They do a lot of mainly just like pictures of people who sadly have passed, and then they'll also do like little snippets of their life and articles and stuff.
That could be nice.
So it's just a way to kind of keep their memories alive and keep them present, so that we're like, don't forget about these people.
Yeah, well, that's what I have. What are some of your personal theories?
Well, some of my personal theories, especially, I don't know, man, from Jimmy and Janice and Jim.
Those were the three that...
three really, really kind of, I don't want to say scare me or creep me out, but really have me intrigued.
Well, I think with Janis Joplin, from what my understanding is she overdosed on heroin, but I think people were saying that she thought it was cocaine and took, a different dose. But, to me, wouldn't you know?
I'm not sure, because they said the same thing about Jim Morrison, that he thought the heroin was cocaine. So I actually don't know if
I don't know how that works.
Or if you sniff heroin or not. I think you could, but I'm not sure.
I don't know how that works. I didn't do enough digging into that part of it, because that's just
it's just
something
odd.
Yeah.
Especially if their drug dealers know.
Well, that's
I'm going to give you heroin because you always buy heroin from me. I'm not just all of a sudden going to give you coke.
That's another theory on Janis Joplin, is that the dealer may have gotten in a different batch or whatever, however you want to call it, and it was much stronger than what she was used to.
That too.
So she gets her normal amount, and then it ends up being a lot more.
Because it's a more potent batch of heroin.
It could have been an accident or accidental. I know that we're talking back to mental illness. So young adults aged 18 to 29 are still experiencing cognitive development. This is one of the reasons mental illness can present itself at that time. So that's why in a lot of these different ones, they talk about pairing mental illness with drug usage or alcohol abuse. So
yeah, it's definitely a way for people to self-medicate.
I mean, I don't think it was talked about back then. We're just now getting into the kind of phase of people actually normalizing mental illness and conversations about it. So back then, I can't imagine that it was something easy to talk about or bring up to people.
Yeah, something that I know we both talked about off the podcast and that we've mentioned is Aaron Hernandez.
Oh,
and sadly, he also passed away at 27, guys, and that was through suicide. And he had a lot of mental issues that he wasn't able to talk about. And this is something that we need to talk about. And there's other things that happen to him, too.
I was going to talk about Aaron Hernandez because that case to me is so interesting, and I don't think it was a suicide. His lawyer didn't even think it was a suicide.
Yep.
But I just felt like it didn't go with the flow on this one. But do you want to read the list of people? And
I'm gonna read off the list.
There's a couple
so we already talked about Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. There was also a man from the Grateful Dead, Pigpen. His name was Ron McKernan, but he went by Pigpen. And it was also due to heavy drinking, though. He had an internal hemorrhage, which that whole group of, rock stars did a lot of drugs and drinking. I mentioned Amy Winehouse. I'm a huge Winehouse fan, and that still gets me to this day.
My fiance was like, why aren't you guys talking more about Amy Winehouse?
I can't. She has so many documentaries out that I feel like a lot of other people have talked about her.
I think so, too. She's up there with Cobain, in my opinion. They're the two most talked about people. So do your own research, guys.
Yeah. And then there's a couple rappers I wanted to mention also. There was this rapper, his name was Stretch. He came from New York in 1995. He was murdered. There's also another rapper by the name of Fat Pat who was also murdered in 1998. And then there's Fariki Ta, who was murdered in 1999 for a mistaken identity. The hell. Yeah. So that's very, very, very sad. There's also a few other actors. There's Jonathan Brandis, who was on One Life to Live, and he was one of the kids from It. It's Suicide. Yeah, I think so. I think One Life to Live was a soap opera.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and that was through suicide also. Other ones his name was Richie Edwards. He was a guitarist for Manic Street Preachers. This was a Welsh punk band. He wasn't actually pronounced dead until 2008. The reason is because he disappeared in 1995, and they didn't find his car until 2 weeks later. So they didn't pronounce him dead till a few years ago, or 2008, and they still never found him. But he would have been 27 if that's when he passed away. We also have, besides Aaron Hernandez, Reggie Lewis from the Boston Celtics. He passed away in 1993 from a heart attack while at practice, which is always strange. And another artist I wanted to talk about because she's a punk artist and she was also murdered. Her name was Mia Zapata. She was in the band The Gits, and she was one of the original Riot Girls. So if you don't know what exactly a Riot Girl is, it was this huge punk movement for girls in the punk scene, and she was one of them. So, yeah, sad. Right. All of it is freaking sad. So I'm sorry if I depressed everyone today. Yeah. But it's one of those very strange coincidences that, I mean, all these people had such a huge influence in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, so I forgot something about Kurt Cobain. Mm-hmm. Did you read his suicide note?
I didn't read his suicide note, no.
There's a part in it that I kind of wanted to talk about. It says, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Ooh. And it was something, I believe it was a song of Neil Young's. Mm-hmm. But what does that phrase say to you? It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Better to burn out than fade away. I think go for it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm thinking if you're just coming from an artist's point of view, he doesn't want to either burn himself out or burn out his fans when it comes to his music. And that's the only thing I can think of.
See, to me, okay, it's better to burn out than to fade away. So, to burn out, I think of it like as if I were to, like, blow out a candle, mm-hmm. It immediately stops.
There you go, yeah.
Whereas if you're fading away, it's, like, kind of a prolonged process. Mm-hmm. You're
and I think that's what I meant, and I had it backwards.
You're good. But then, like, so that was crazy to me that it was in a suicide.
Yeah.
You know, that's something I wanted to mention as well. I'm curious as to what other people would think about that specific line.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So something that I looked up last night, like, after doing all my research and being done with this podcast, I started just kind of thinking about the number 27, and I don't know a lot about numerology.
I looked it up too. Okay. It's so funny.
So what I found is that the number 27 symbolizes compassion and philanthropy. And I think for any artist, they're a philanthropist, right?
We would hope.
So I was like, and a lot of them do show a lot of compassion towards, you know, everyone, especially when it comes to outcasts. That's a lot of big things that a lot of these people on this list were outcasts.
Well. Yeah.
So
common theme was like trauma for sure. How trauma leads you into creating or like that's like unfortunately another common thing is you don't have to go through certain traumas or abuse, you know, in order to be a great artist. But I feel like look at all of these people on our paper. Yeah, they all went through hard childhoods and a lot of trauma in the early stages of their lives.
Yeah. That it had to have some sort of effect.
There's a connection there for sure.
And then like we mentioned earlier, it was, especially for the first 6, it was definitely the lifestyle back in the 70s. And like we said earlier, it's also a way to self-medicate.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys.
Ooh, all right. Well, that was a crazy ride right there.
That was an interesting one for our 3rd episode, I think.
I think we got a little heavy, but hopefully you guys are still with us.
Yeah, yeah. And what's our next episode, Serena? What have we decided?
Oh, yes. So
what was it?
This episode's going to come out on Friday.
Yes.
So the next episode is going to be on Friday the 13th. We're actually going to go ahead and drop 2 episodes for you guys. Just to kind of bring things back on a little, you know, maybe not so realistic, but possibly realistic note. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about black-eyed children.
Black-eyed kids, BEKs. Yeah, BEKs. And demonic possessions.
Possessions and demons and stuff. Yeah. So we'll try to get into a little more paranormal stuff than
I'm trying to get my brother
just strange coincidences.
Trying to get my brother to write me an email about sleep paralysis. So Scotty, if you're actually listening to this episode, man,
Scott, hello.
weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com.
So
all right, let's wrap this one up, guys.
All right. Well, again, thanks for tuning in, guys, to Weird Mythic Podcast. We do have social media at Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram and Facebook.com/WeirdMythic.
Yeah, you can talk to us on Twitter, guys. I'm super active on Twitter lately. It's Twitter.com/WeirdMythic.
Hey.
And then again, if you have an email you want to send us of any creepy personal encounters or even your theories on the 27 Club.
I would really like to hear you guys' opinions on this, honestly.
Let's start a conversation about it. That's weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep. So, thanks again, guys. I hope you have a good rest of the weekend.
Take care.